Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hi, Herman and Corn. So the brewing conflict between Iran and the US and maybe Israel has been the daily staple of the news for the past week or two here. And it's kind of one of those really odd waiting games because everyone's trying to read the tea leaves of what's going on. What appears to be happening is that the US has been moving warships and force around Iran for the past couple of weeks. And today I was reading that the Chinese released or leaked that their satellite spotted a THAAD battery being deployed in Jordan. Apparently another one is in Qatar. So what I have to ask Herman and Corn is, we talked about deception yesterday and satellite intelligence, and nothing really is accidental in what's happening at the moment. We talked also about the strange alliance between North Korea, Iran, Russia in recent days, and how they're aligning their defense positions and intelligence, as the Institute for the Study of War points out in their series of briefings. My question to you two is twofold. The first is this THAAD system, which we saw involved in the previous war with Iran. We've talked about Israel's sophisticated air defense system was the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, and David Sling apparently also providing significant interception capabilities in the last war. But we saw that the US was supplying or moving THAAD systems into the region, and apparently now it's covering a broader swathe of territory. So the first question I have, Herman and Corn, is when we talk about the air defense systems that Israel has. So Israel was saying in the last war that, it's not running out. We have plenty of interceptors, but that I think was the assumed fear that if Iran was going to be continuing to throw so many missiles into the air, that it could be banking on Israel running out of interceptors. So does the THAAD system, how does that fit alongside Israel's air defenses in terms of capabilities? And why, for example, if Israel's line that it had plenty of interceptor missiles, there was there was a huge stockpile. If that was true, what would be the tactical advantage and reason in the US buttressing Israel's air defenses? Because that didn't really make sense, at least on the surface. The second thing is, what do you think is actually going on at the moment? When you have this sort of huge buildup of, I'm looking on Twitter here as I record this prompt, I'm looking at basically everything moving into this area, ships, watch the THAAD missiles being loaded up into these massive planes. So it's a very public show by the US, and I'm guessing that it's deterrence, but you might think that this is a specific brand of deterrence in which the US could be doing all of this as quietly as could be, let's just say. When we talk about, deception and how anyone can assume that if you deploy a big anti-missile battery in a place like Jordan or Qatar, for that matter, that's going to be in the news. When the US is releasing photos of missiles being loaded onto planes, that's of course going to get in the news. So the deterrence here that we're seeing is a very public deterrence. And my question is, what would be the reason, do you think, that the US is choosing to do this in such a public fashion? And what's especially confusing about this situation is doing so at the same time as pursuing diplomacy. Because on the one hand, you have chat, the Iran and the US seemingly talking, and on the other hand, in the same day, you're reading about these batteries being deployed all over the place. So it seems like if diplomacy's objective is to avoid military force, they're literally being, it's a parallel track up to the minute here. So I'm curious as to what your thoughts might be about deterrence. As we're seeing it being exercised now, the current choice of tactics by the US, and regarding this significant deployment of THAAD missiles, and I'm reading from Defense Intelligence 3 days ago, reporting Channel 14. Channel 14 reports that the US has finalized the deployment of Patriot and THAAD missile defense systems across 20 bases in the Middle East, amid concerns over potential Iranian missile retaliation. And some folks have even gone so far as to calculate what percentage of the US's stock of these systems is deployed, and come to the conclusion that it's all but one. 20 locations, including bases in Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi, UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. That's apparently all the places where the US has moved these systems into. So Herman and Corn, very interesting things going on at the moment. I'd love to get your take on what we're seeing behind the headlines.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn, and I am joined as always by my brother, the man who probably has more tabs open about missile defense systems than anyone else in Jerusalem right now. It is February 11th, 2026, and if you have looked at a window or a screen in the last 48 hours, you know things are feeling a bit heavy.
Herman Poppleberry at your service. And you are not wrong, Corn. My browser is currently a graveyard of technical specifications, satellite imagery, and regional security white papers. It is a fascinating, if somewhat tense, time to be living in this part of the world. We are seeing movements of hardware that we have not seen on this scale in decades.
It really is. Our housemate Daniel sent us a voice note today that gets right to the heart of what everyone is looking at on their news feeds. He's asking about the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, or THAAD, and how it actually fits into the existing layers of defense we have here in Israel.
It is a great question because on the surface it looks like a bit of a redundancy. If you have the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, and David is Sling, why do you need the American THAAD system? And more importantly, why is the United States being so incredibly public about moving these batteries around? Daniel pointed out that we are seeing reports of these systems being deployed not just in Israel, but in Jordan, Qatar, Iraq, and across the region, totaling something like 20 locations.
So, let us start with the technical side, Herman. For those who are not obsessively reading defense blogs, how does THAAD actually differ from the systems Israel already has in place? We hear these names thrown around like they are interchangeable, but they are clearly not.
To understand this, you have to think about air defense like a series of filters or nets. Each one is designed to catch something at a different altitude and a different speed. Israel has what is arguably the most sophisticated multi-layered defense in the world. At the very top, you have the Arrow 3. This is an exo-atmospheric interceptor. That means it hits the incoming ballistic missile while it is still in space, before it even re-enters the atmosphere. It is essentially a spacefaring vehicle that hunts other spacefaring vehicles.
Right, and that is crucial because if you intercept a missile in space, you are dealing with the debris and any potential payload far away from populated areas. You do not want a chemical or nuclear warhead breaking apart 5 miles above Tel Aviv.
Precisely. Then you have the Arrow 2, which operates in the upper atmosphere. It is the backup for Arrow 3. If something slips through the space layer, Arrow 2 tries to catch it as it begins its descent. Below that, you have David is Sling, which is meant for medium to long-range rockets and cruise missiles. It is that middle-tier defender. And of course, everyone knows Iron Dome, which handles the short-range stuff, the grad rockets and mortars.
So where does the American THAAD system sit in that stack? Is it just a second David is Sling?
Not quite. THAAD is very specialized. Its name, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, tells you exactly what it does. It intercepts missiles in their terminal phase, which is the very last stage of their flight as they are diving toward their target. It operates in both the upper atmosphere and just outside it. In terms of capability, it overlaps quite a bit with Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. But there is a key technical difference in how it kills the target. THAAD uses hit-to-kill technology. It does not carry an explosive warhead. It literally just slams into the incoming missile at incredible speeds, using pure kinetic energy to destroy it.
That sounds like trying to hit a bullet with another bullet, while both are traveling at several times the speed of sound.
It is exactly that. While Arrow 2 uses a blast fragmentation warhead, which explodes near the target to shred it, THAAD is a kinetic kill vehicle. This is preferred for certain types of warheads because the sheer force of the impact ensures that the entire payload is pulverized rather than just knocked off course. But the reason THAAD is so highly regarded is not just the interceptor itself, it is the radar, the ANTPY-2. This is an X-band radar that can see incredibly far and with extreme high resolution. It can distinguish between a real warhead and a decoy or a piece of debris from a spent rocket stage. When you integrate a THAAD battery into an existing network, you are not just adding more interceptors, you are adding one of the most powerful sets of eyes in the world to the grid.
Okay, so that leads to the second part of Daniel's question. If Israel has these layers, and if the official line from the Defense Ministry is that we have plenty of interceptors, why the surge of American equipment? Why bring in THAAD if the Arrow system is already doing its job? Is the plenty of interceptors claim just propaganda?
This is where the math of attrition comes in, and this is something people often overlook. During the Iranian missile attack back in October of 2024, and the one in April before that, we saw hundreds of projectiles being fired. Now, even if your intercept rate is 95%, you are still using a lot of interceptors. Each Arrow 3 missile costs roughly $2 to $3 million. But more importantly, they take time to manufacture. We are talking months, sometimes years, to replace a single NIDA's worth of expended inventory.
So it is a capacity problem. It is not that the systems do not work. It is that you might run out of ammo if the conflict scales up from a one-night event to a month-long campaign.
Exactly. There is a concept in military strategy called the interceptor-to-threat ratio. Usually, you want to fire at least 2 interceptors at every incoming missile to ensure a kill. If Iran or its proxies decide to launch a massive, sustained barrage over weeks instead of just a single night, you could see a situation where the stockpiles of Arrow and David is Sling interceptors start to run low. By bringing in THAAD, the United States is essentially providing an immediate massive infusion of high-end inventory. It is an insurance policy against a war of exhaustion. It tells the adversary that they cannot simply empty the magazine of the Israeli defense.
That makes sense from a logistics standpoint. But Daniel also asked about the tactical advantage beyond just having more missiles. Is there something THAAD can do that Arrow cannot?
There is the mobility factor and the integration factor. THAAD is designed to be rapidly deployable. You can put it on a C-17 transport plane and have it anywhere in the world in a matter of hours. Israel's systems are mobile to an extent, but they are largely tied to specific geographic defense zones. THAAD allows the United States to plug holes in the regional coverage very quickly. Also, when you have American crews operating these systems on the ground in Israel or Jordan, it creates a very different strategic picture. It is not just about the hardware, it is about the presence.
Right. Because if an Iranian missile hits a THAAD battery, they are not just hitting an Israeli asset, they are hitting American soldiers. That is a massive escalatory step that Iran has to account for in their calculus.
Exactly. It is the ultimate tripwire. It signals to Tehran that the United States is not just supporting Israel from afar with intelligence or carrier groups in the Mediterranean, but is physically integrated into the defense of the country. It removes any ambiguity about whether the United States would be involved if a full-scale war broke out. It is the difference between a friend saying, "I have your back," and a friend standing in front of you with a shield.
I want to pivot to the public nature of this, which Daniel found so interesting. Usually, when you are moving sensitive military assets, you might want to do it quietly to maintain some level of strategic surprise, or at least not to tip your hand. But here, we are seeing high-resolution photos of THAAD components being loaded onto planes at Dover Air Force Base. We are seeing official press releases about the number of batteries. Why be so loud about it?
It is a specific type of signaling called deterrence through transparency. In the world of high-stakes diplomacy and military posturing, silence can sometimes be interpreted as weakness or indecision. If the U.S. moved these systems in secret, Iran might think the U.S. is hesitant or trying to avoid a confrontation. By making these deployments very public, the United States is sending a clear, unambiguous message to three different audiences.
Okay, let us break those down. Who is the first audience?
The first, obviously, is Iran and its allies. The message to them is, do not think you can overwhelm the regional air defense through sheer numbers. We have the depth, we have the technology, and we are already here. It is meant to discourage them from launching that next massive barrage by showing them that the cost-benefit analysis has changed. If they know their missiles will likely be intercepted by an even more robust shield, the political and military value of an attack drops significantly. You do not want to fire $1 billion worth of missiles just to have them all turned into expensive fireworks in the sky.
And the second audience?
The second audience is the regional allies, places like Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. These countries are in a very tough spot. They are caught between their own security needs and the political pressure of the broader regional conflict. By publicly deploying these systems to 20 different locations across the Middle East, the United States is saying to its partners, we are committed to your stability. We are not going to leave you exposed to Iranian retaliation if things escalate. It is about keeping the regional coalition together. If Jordan feels safe, they are more likely to continue cooperating with the US and Israel.
And I assume the third audience is domestic? Both in the United States and here in Israel?
Yes. For the Israeli public, it is a reassurance that they are not standing alone during a time of extreme anxiety. For the American public, it is a show of strength and leadership, though that is always a double-edged sword politically. But there is also a fourth audience we should mention, Russia and China. The United States is demonstrating that despite its focus on Ukraine or the Pacific, it still has the logistical muscle to flood the Middle East with high-tech assets at a moment's notice. It is a flex of global reach.
That leads us to the most confusing part of this parallel track Daniel mentioned. While all this metal is moving into the region, while the warships are taking positions, and the THAAD batteries are being set up, the United States is also pursuing active diplomacy with Iran. We are hearing about back-channel talks in Oman, discussions about de-escalation, and potential off-ramps. How do you reconcile those two things? It feels like having one hand extended for a handshake, while the other is cocking a pistol.
That is actually a very classic approach to foreign policy. It is the modern version of Theodore Roosevelt's speak softly and carry a big stick. The logic is that diplomacy without a credible threat of force is just a request. If the United States goes to the negotiating table with Iran and says, please do not attack Israel or our regional partners, Iran has very little incentive to listen if they think they can achieve their goals through military pressure.
So the military buildup is the leverage that makes the diplomacy possible.
Exactly. You create a situation where Iran looks at the map and sees 20 THAAD and Patriot locations, 2 carrier strike groups, and a squadron of F-22s, and they realize that a military solution is going to be incredibly costly and likely unsuccessful. Suddenly, the diplomatic off-ramp looks a lot more attractive. The buildup is designed to narrow Iran's options until diplomacy is the only logical choice left on the table. It is about creating a position of strength from which to negotiate.
But does that not risk backfiring? If you are Iran, and you see this massive buildup, do you not feel backed into a corner? Could it not provoke the very attack you are trying to deter because they feel like the window of opportunity is closing? Like, I better hit them now before the shield is fully locked in place.
That is the great risk of deterrence. It is a very fine line between discouraging an attack and signaling an imminent invasion. This is why the United States is being so public about the defensive nature of these systems. THAAD is not an offensive weapon. You cannot use a THAAD battery to invade a country or blow up a factory. It is a shield, not a sword. By emphasizing air defense, the United States is trying to say, we are making it impossible for you to hurt us, but we are not currently planning to strike you. It is an attempt to lower the temperature by making aggression look futile.
It is interesting you mention that distinction. I was reading a piece the other day about how the shield can actually be seen as an offensive preparation. The argument was that if you have a perfect shield, you can strike your enemy with impunity because you do not have to fear their retaliation. Do you think Tehran sees it that way?
Almost certainly. From their perspective, a robust Israeli-American air defense network neutralizes their primary strategic tool, which is their massive missile and drone arsenal. If that arsenal becomes ineffective, Iran loses its primary way to project power and deter an Israeli or American strike on its nuclear program. So, while we see THAAD as a peacekeeping or defensive measure, they see it as a shift in the strategic balance that could eventually lead to them being attacked. This is the security dilemma in international relations. One side's defensive move is seen as an offensive threat by the other.
This brings us to the broader regional picture. Daniel mentioned the reports of THAAD in Iraq and Jordan. That is a huge deal. Iraq in particular has a very complicated relationship with the United States military presence. Deploying advanced air defense there is a massive political statement.
It really is. It suggests that the United States is looking at the region as a single integrated battle space. They are not just defending point A or point B. They are trying to create a sensor-to-shooter network that covers the entire flight path of an Iranian missile from the moment it leaves the silo until it reaches its target. If you have a radar in Iraq and an interceptor in Jordan, you can take out a missile much earlier in its flight than if you wait until it is over Tel Aviv.
Which goes back to what you said about the ANTPY-2 radar. If those radars are networked, they can pass tracking data to each other. A radar in Qatar can see a launch, pass that data to a battery in Israel, and the Israeli interceptor can be launched before the missile is even over the horizon.
Exactly. It is called launch on remote. It effectively expands the defended area and gives the interceptors more time to calculate the solution. This integration is what the United States has been working toward for decades in the Middle East, the so-called Middle East Air Defense Alliance. It has always been a political nightmare to coordinate because these countries do not always get along, but the current crisis has essentially forced everyone his hand. The threat from Iran has become a unifying force for air defense.
It is fascinating to see how the technology is driving the politics. You have countries that might not even have formal diplomatic ties, but their computers are talking to each other to make sure they do not get hit by the same missile.
It is the ultimate pragmatic alliance, and it is why the public nature of it is so important. It tells the world that this network is now live. It is no longer a theoretical what-if scenario. It is a functioning, deployed reality. The U.S. is effectively building a regional iron dome that covers multiple nations.
So, if we look at the next few months, what does this tell us about the trajectory of the conflict? If the United States is doubling down on this deterrence plus diplomacy track, what should we be looking for?
I think we need to look for the quiet parts of the diplomacy. Usually, when the military side is this loud, the real work is happening in secret channels. We should be looking for signs of Iranian restraint. If we see a decrease in the frequency of proxy attacks from places like Iraq or Yemen, or if we see Iran backing off its rhetoric about a crushing response, then we know the deterrence is working. The goal is to get back to a state of frozen conflict, where neither side feels they can gain anything from a major escalation.
And if it does not work? If Iran decides to test the shield?
Then we are in a very dangerous place. Because if you have deployed your best tech, and you have made all these public promises, and an attack still gets through or causes significant damage, the pressure on the United States to respond offensively becomes almost unbearable. That is the danger of being so public. You are putting your credibility on the line. If the shield fails, you have to use the sword. The U.S. is essentially betting that the THAAD is so good that Iran won't even try.
It is a high-stakes game of poker, and everyone has their cards on the table. One thing I wanted to circle back to is the misconception busting we like to do. I think a lot of people see these headlines and think, oh, the United States is sending missiles to Israel because Israel is losing. But from what you were saying, it is actually the opposite. It is about reinforcing a position of strength to prevent the war from expanding.
That is exactly right. It is not a sign of Israeli weakness. It is a sign of American commitment to maintaining the current status quo. Israel's own systems have performed remarkably well, probably better than anyone expected in a real-world saturation attack. The THAAD deployment is about the next war, the one that everyone is trying to prevent. It is about making sure that even if Iran fires 1,000 missiles, the result is the same. It is about psychological dominance as much as physical defense.
There is also the human element. Daniel mentioned the crews. These are American soldiers living on Israeli bases, or in Jordan, or in Qatar. That changes the local dynamic too. It is not just a battery of missiles, it is a community of people.
It is, and that has its own set of challenges. But it also creates a level of military-to-military cooperation that is incredibly deep. Israeli and American technicians are working side by side, sharing data in real time. That kind of integration does not just go away once the crisis is over. It creates a long-term shift in how the region is defended. We are seeing the birth of a permanent, integrated regional security architecture.
I think that is a really important point. This is not just a temporary fix. This is a massive leap forward in the regional security architecture. Even if the current tension with Iran is resolved diplomatically, the infrastructure that is being put in place right now will likely stay for years. It changes the map of the Middle East.
Absolutely. We saw this in Eastern Europe with the Aegis Ashore systems. Once those defensive shields are built, they become a permanent part of the landscape. They change the geography of security. They make certain types of aggression permanently obsolete.
So, to summarize for Daniel and for our listeners, THAAD is the high-altitude safety net that complements Israel's existing layers. It provides more capacity, better radar, and a direct American tripwire. The public nature of the deployment is a deliberate choice to deter Iran and reassure allies, and the diplomacy is not a contradiction, but a partner to the military buildup. You need the shield to make the handshake worth something.
Well said, Corn. It is a complex, multi-dimensional chess game. And while it is easy to get caught up in the scary headlines, understanding the underlying logic of these moves helps make a little more sense of the world. We are watching a superpower try to manage a regional crisis through a mix of high-tech hardware and high-stakes talking.
It really does. And hey, if you are listening and you are finding this deep dive into regional security and missile defense interesting, we would really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It helps more people find the show and join these conversations. We are trying to cut through the noise and look at the actual mechanics of what is happening.
It really does. We love seeing the community grow and hearing your thoughts on these topics. Every review helps us reach someone else who is staring at their newsfeed wondering what a THAAD battery actually does.
Definitely. We will be keeping a close eye on this as it develops. February 2026 is turning out to be a very consequential month. We have the diplomatic meetings in Geneva coming up next week, and more hardware arriving in the Gulf as we speak.
That it is, and we will be here to talk through it. Thanks for the prompt, Daniel. It was a good one to sink our teeth into. It really forced us to look at the intersection of physics and foreign policy.
For sure. You can find all our past episodes and a way to get in touch with us at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We are also on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. Send us your questions, no matter how technical or weird they might seem.
This has been My Weird Prompts. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there and keep your eyes on the skies, but maybe keep your feet on the ground.
We will talk to you next time. Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox Turbo.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.